on redevelopment as well as business attraction in Orange County, California. That's also been involved with a lot of redevelopment of a downtown district. So seeing that from kind of inception to completion, as well as has a lot of experience in the private sector as well. So has been working with Griffin Structures there, doing a lot of marketing and outreach related to public capital projects. So just really excited to have Victoria here with us and introduce you to her, but I'll let her do a little as well, or answer any questions that you may have as well.
Welcome, Tori. If you would like to give a little bit more background, maybe some of the background that Cameron didn't share, we would love to hear more.
Sure. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, first of all, I'm just so happy to be here. Everyone has been so welcoming in the city. It's just been a pleasant 2 days. I'm eager to hit the ground running now that I've learned some names and faces and organizations. As Cameron said, I was a redevelopment project manager for a historic downtown, which was very similar to downtown Meridian. So I'm really excited to maybe take some of the activities that we implemented that help the businesses expand, and then which brings in more people, which helps bring in new business. So I'm really excited about that. Also worked on a lot of business attraction, partnering both with the county and the state and federal agencies to bring in and also retain and expand businesses. So I'm excited to bring my skills to Meridian and eager to contribute.
Thank you. And Tori, I would say that you are one of the most well-prepared candidates we have ever interviewed. Oh, she read our plans. She did a lot of her research on who we are, what our culture is, and we greatly appreciate you joining our team. Look forward to working with you, and certainly you're working with a great team.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 5B is also under our Community Development Department, Comprehensive Plan Update. We were the benefactors of hearing it in our previous work session, and I will turn this over to Caleb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of Council, if it's okay with you, I think for this time, Brian and I are going to stay seated here. Unless you want, we can go to the podium too. But okay. It's a little more comfortable for us here. But and we will try not to make it repetitive, although some of this, if someone's tuning in on YouTube, I don't want to, and we did have a council member that didn't hear the first presentation, but we'll try to, it's not deja vu for you, but I know you've been involved with the comp plan, but we did want to address this topic with you. So in advance of the public hearing and review of the new draft comprehensive plan, staff wanted to provide a department closeout of sorts of our existing comprehensive plan. As you know, a vast majority of the goals, objectives, and action items of the current plan were crafted in the early 2000s and then reevaluated in 2010, 2011, but our community looks much different these days. The new proposed comprehensive plan incorporates and continues many of the good elements from the currently adopted plan, but has been rebuilt and vetted through hundreds of hours of steering committee meetings, technical focus groups, coordination with agencies and service providers, and public outreach events, and by thousands of comments, surveys, and poll responses from community members. The main reason for this is staff envisions a pretty robust public hearing on the new plan, and we thought it would be a good idea to report out some of the current or old plan elements and administrative processes and information to you as a department report, allowing more time for the new proposed plan at the upcoming public hearings to be the topic. This slide is a repeat from the previous one, so I probably won't go into that. Nothing's really changing. We are carrying forward the current kind of structure for the most part of the current plan with an ECR and a comprehensive plan, but the chapters are changing. So in the adopted plan, we have about 500 policies in 6 chapters, and they're listed there. The new plan, and Brian was really trying to get that down to less than 500, but we still have about the same number of policies just with the new ones. The memo that was prepared and for this meeting, it's 69 pages long, so hopefully you didn't print it out. But those 500 or so policies are available to you, so you can see in the existing plan where that may end up in a new plan. Did we keep it? Is it kept but revised, or did we just squash it and it's going to be dead? So wanted you, if you're curious about some of those policies, again, that may be several years old now, we did the numbers on that, but we are keeping quite a few of those existing policies, but those ones that we're keeping were, tweaking, if you will, or changing them to meet the current conditions. So again, we've got that tracked. So if you want to do that, but again, we thought rather than doing that at a public hearing, if you want to see those types of things. So some of the plan development and the process, again, some of this is repetitive, but again, working in close concert with Logan Simpson. We've been working on this for about 18 months now, the steering committee, public outreach. Again, this is a duplicate slide. I will just point out that last one is not true. That was just to see if you were paying attention. Not 100% of everyone agrees with all the policies and the future land use map designation. So you will have a public hearing. It's not a perfect plan, but we think it's darn close. But you will have people that have specific things that they aren't satisfied about when we get to talking about a new plan, but that's for a new plan. Scope of work. So this is really just to kind of I don't want to call it, we're not closing out the contract with Logan Simpson, but again, it's an opportunity to just touch base, make sure we're on the same page as we come up on that finish line. Council did direct us to compose a new plan, get that completed by this end of this calendar year. We started off, and that's why some of the timelines are a little bit different. Technically, it's only been since May, but we've been planning this as staff since before that. So it's been a couple years we've been really looking to update the plan, starting with auditing what we have now to build on the next plan. What's good, what's bad, just our take as staff, looking at other studies, working with other departments on where they're at with some of their plans and studies, and just making sure we have a good base to get into the community process and setting ourselves up for success in really developing the plan. So again, public involvement, outreach, and engagement throughout the process. Phase 3, which was a little more technical, we didn't do as much with the public. There was a little bit of a lull there after the winter, kind of going into the spring. But that was intentional. It was because we needed to really work closely with our other service providers, agencies, experts in fields to make sure that what we'd heard from the community is possible and feasible to do. So a little bit of ground truthing there. But for the most part, the public has had access even through that phase. We kept them engaged on what's going on. Stay tuned. The draft plan's coming. Then we'll share it with you. You help develop it, but we're crossing T's, dotting I's, and some of that we can't do with 120,000 people. Just a couple of things, and this little portion of this slide should look fairly familiar to you. But some of the focus elements and areas that we included in our scope of work with Logan Simpson was strategic growth management, we just talked about a little bit with the county and public services. The comprehensive impact of growth, and again, use strategic growth, that development impact tool, service impact tool, excuse me, kind of comes into play, as well as transportation and economic development. Those are two separate bullets, but they're intertwined. This all runs together. You put jobs and housing and how you grow with those services, it all interacts. One of the big things, the focus groups that we did with the transportation focus group, and again with even the ED focus group, looked at, are there key transportation corridors where we can put more jobs or more people that make sense then to maybe invest in public transit in the future? We heard from our community, I think, at least to me, pretty loud and clear, they don't want density everywhere all the time, but maybe some corridors that already maybe have that natural or recent even conglomeration of those types of uses that make sense for some higher density to go. Eagle Road, for example, or Overland Road again, for example. Is that something where we should encourage that so we can get some low density residential other places? And so overall, we average out at a density financially can sustain, provide the services to the entire community overall in the long term. So we did that through, again, transportation focus group, economic development focus group. Cameron led the economic development focus group. Brian looked at the housing and community design, thank you, what it was called, focus group. And so we kind of divvied that work out. Our transportation commission served as the base for that transportation group. A great group of panelists for the economic development. Everybody from ISU to Blue Cross to, just a great community partner who really spoke their mind on what they thought the future looked like in the Valley and in particular Meridian. And then specific area concepts. So we worked with our consultants going into that contract, 4 areas that we had called out to develop specific area concepts for that in our current comp plan we knew weren't quite right. The Fields area, or northwest, if you will, kind of on the other side of McDermott, future State Highway 16. Southwest, the Southern Rim, and Magic Bridge. Without getting too much into, the punchline or the draft plan, some of those we may still not have all the way right. But that's something where we were intentional. We developed concept plans, 2 or 3 concept plans for those areas, and went out to the public and said, here's alternative futures. Give us your feedback. Some of you may recall, we had one of those meetings in Conference Room AB on a Tuesday night, and I think some of you had a break, came in. We had a packed house in there, talking to folks in Locust View Heights there at Locust Grove and I-84. So we tried to engage with folks and look at what our options as far as land uses go, redevelopment plans for some of these key areas. We looked at other areas, but these are the 4 that we called out with our consultants early on to say these ones we need some help in, and they helped us. I already touched on the focus group, so kind of did that out of order. I apologize. And then again, Logan Simpson helps us just make those meetings go. And then, of course, the master mobility map is a tool, so this isn't going to be part of the comprehensive plan. This won't be adopted or anything like that as the comp plan. But similar to that service impact tool, it's a tool that we have then that we envision throwing up on our website. Somebody that may be looking to move to our community goes, well, I really like this subdivision out here, but man, there's no sidewalks to get anywhere. They can pull this up. They can look at ACHD's plans. When can this roadway, when do we anticipate that being widened? Look at our Parks Pathways Master Plan. Oh, there's a pathway maybe that gets us to a future school up there. Transit stops, if you're interested in transit. Where are the routes and stops now? Where are the routes in the future potentially? So this really takes all the plans from all the different agencies and conglomerates them together. I don't know if this is exactly how David Zaremba envisioned it, but this was his kind of last parting words to me as I really think it makes sense if we develop a 100-year plan. And we look at 20 years, and that's so short-sighted. 20 years comes and goes. We need to have a comprehensive master mobility that isn't constrained by 5 years or even 20 years. It should be. We're not quite there, but this is the best we have. No one in our valley is looking 100 years out, but this is kind of pushing that envelope. We should be working together to be looking ultimate, not what's next. We're behind. So again, it's not part of the plan, but it's a related tool that I thought this was a better venue to kind of discuss that, share with you, rather than take up time at a public hearing where this really isn't a new comp plan, but it will be a look at.
I think David Zaremba would be very proud. So thank you for adding that.
And this is one that Councilman Kavanagh brought up earlier this year. So, and again, similarly, this isn't going to be embedded in the comprehensive plan, but it's related. It's something where that third bullet there, the current comprehensive plan has 3 policies regarding signage. So Brian's group paired that, looked at that, pared it down to 1, and we're not going to get into the details, right, because that's coming up at a public hearing, but they pared that down to 1 policy. What I'm working with legal on is bringing a resolution, sharing that draft plan with you all, and just recognizing that this plan exists, and then we'll have 1 policy in the plan that says, yep, there's this thing developed that really does, as resources allow, we'd like to welcome people to our community and let them know they're entering this great city of ours, and signage is one way to do it. So we'll have some more discussion on that, and I'll bring that back to you all. Not asking you to adopt that now or recognize but there will be a resolution. I think so Brian found this. Just I don't think there's any copyright, infringement type things, but obviously a city to our west was pretty impressed by our logo and signage plan that we came up with. That
they asked for permission.
There's similarities, anyways, right? So it's a compliment. So similarities there with that. So anyway, so that's something that will be happening between now and when the comp plan actually gets to your public hearing. I'd like to have that signage plan recognized, because there's a draft policy in the draft plan that says what you're going to be doing with this. Question on that one or not, but that's kind of putting that to bed then. And again, just mainly for Councilman Palmer's benefit, because I think everyone else was here when we talked about this. I will hover on this slide for a little bit, but we have developed service impact tool with Logan. Well, Logan Simpson's largely developed it, but we've been working with police, public works, parks, other departments to look at where our current infrastructure and services are and where they're planned. So similar to the master mobility map, this shows where things are today. Again, parcel readiness, although it's not comprehensive. As a developer, you aren't going to be able to say, hey, city, show us what you're showing with parcel readiness, and I'm going to go look at these parcels, because there's other things that factor in. But it gives you a pretty good idea of where most, if not all, those utilities are versus pushing them further and further out from the center. So again, this is something we envision using to report out data and information to you all to say, this parcel or this area, ripe came into my mind, but is ready for development, or more or less ready for development. We're still playing with how that gets reported out, whether it's colors or a number. We don't want to do A through F type of a thing, but again, painting a picture. Schools, maybe there may be capacity there, but if sewer and water are 1.5 miles away, it's not the best parcel to develop sooner. So this is, again, a tool, but it's not the comp plan, but it was something, while we had a consultant on board, we asked them to help us develop. One of the things that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is kind of broaching the topic of the plan, but we had some property owners that were concerned about the 10-mile specific area plan, and in particular the transportation network, because it would have bisected some of their properties. We tried to explain to them that it's not a blueprint, it's a general guide for where we need a roadway network to go. And we just finally said, okay, we'll change the diagram then to just show that it floats somewhere between here and there. Not going to get into that too much, but it was just, there's text that says these aren't exact alignments, but the city wasn't going to go and build a road right through their property. So I'm going to pass it off to Brian again to talk about some of the next slide.
So again, this is sort of a closeout with the future land use map in particular. Just some kind of high-level notes. Most of the map has not changed. Most changes that have been made are cleanup. Existing and future icons have been adjusted to reflect what's been built or what current plans have show, for example, with the school district. There has been some future land use consolidations, the actual designations. I'll touch on that again in a minute. And then there are going to be a bunch of other changes as well. You'll hear about those in the public hearing, but just to stress, those aren't one and done, and we've had all this other work go into those. So these are the future land use designations that have been consolidated with a new plan. You won't see these again, which is why we're talking about them now. The first one is rural estate. That one probably will come up in the public hearing, but essentially this is most of the area that CUNA has already annexed from us. Half this is literally gone now. The other half we have literally no incentive to keep it from basically encouraging CUNA to do what's happened in the past. The other note there is low-density residential does allow for this. We will just be more specific and intentional about planning for services with these. So that's one. The other three are all within the 10-mile interchange specific area plan. The first one was a civic designation specific to that plan. It was somewhat duplicative with the rest of the citywide designations, so we've merged those. The second one there is green space / parkland. Similarly, it was duplicative with the citywide designation for civic, so we've merged that. And then the last one there is the pipeline easement, which showed the Northwest pipeline. That one was inconsistent in that it wasn't shown citywide. And the second thing is that Williams Pipeline just prefers that not be shown in a lot of detail. So that one's not being merged, it's just being squashed and absorbed by the adjacent designations. This graphic here basically shows some of that specifically in the 10-mile plan. So you can see the civic, the pink on the left in the adopted 10-mile plan are being converted to green or to what's adjacent to it. The gas line pipeline easement there is being merged with the adjacent designations. And then the park designation, again, similarly is being merged with the adjacent designations. Just a note on two there, the park, that wasn't consistent with our pathway plan. The pathway plan has a different alignment, and that's been more current and more recently updated, so we're using that as a default. And the pink one there, the civic 10-mile, that was a planned school, and the reason that's not green now is because they're not planning to have a school there. So, but basically those colors there, you can see all of those are being removed. This one, I won't belabor this since we already discussed it a little bit, but just a note, hopefully you won't be seeing this again, this encroachment issue with our area city impact line. So we've been working on that since the 90s, and hopefully now that's been put to rest. This one we've been talking to you about for several years now, before the new plan and during the conception phases of it, and then also in some of the updates. The steps, so both up and down, again related to land use and something you will not see in the new plan, is the step up in density or the step down in density. The origination of that was originally state law limited comp plan changes to twice a year. That is no longer a limitation. So the original reason and intent for it to be there is not there. Additionally, and furthermore, the difficulty with it is it wasn't easy for the public to understand, and it's not very transparent. So why did you get something completely different than when your map showed? And the second thing is that it was really hard for staff to plan for something that could literally be, so anything yellow on the current map, medium density residential, could be anywhere from 0 to 15 dwelling units per acre. You can't effectively and efficiently plan for services when you have that big of a range. So that you will not see that in the new plan. There are some other things being added or kept to help allow for some flexibility still, but that will all be much more transparent and easily understood, hopefully. So, last thing, and again, I won't stay on here too long since we already covered it, but I just want to note the PDF, that beast of a document that we've relied on forever. That's not going to be our emphasis moving forward. It's going to be on a live media, live format, and be a little bit more responsive to how people interact with it and would like to interact with it moving forward. So we'll keep the PDF. We kind of need that for a record, but the website's really going to be after adopted. When it's adopted, that's going to be kind of how we move forward with engagement to the public.
Just before I conclude our presentation, I do want to, and we didn't plan on doing this today, but after adoption, we certainly will. That second sub-bullet, under the second bullet there, sortable and searchable, it's pretty cool what our IT folks have helped us develop, and Brian's been right along with Catherine doing that. But I think it's going to be a really cool user interface for folks, both on a handheld device, but even, in the comfort of your own home, how you can search for keywords, and it pops up everywhere in the plan, that housing or whatever you're searching for in the plan, and it sorts it, and you can sort the headers by where it's at. Cross-reference, say go here, and that's where you can find it. It's pretty cool. So yeah, we'll do a little more tutorial again after adoption or sometime here in the near future, just kind of show you how all the bells and whistles. So next steps, again, kind of a repetitive slide here. So the application has been transmitted by the city clerk with the hearing in October at City Council, pending their recommendation. And then again, the real work begins. I think the thing that's more appropriate here is that I want to plant that seed with you and really more with those of you that will remain after the calendar year starts again. We're going to probably need some help. Brian and I probably can't do everything that the community wants prioritized to get done in 2020. So I don't know if that's going to mean in-house FTE or consultant help or some combination of that, or if it really is no, let's do it all in-house, then we need that expectation of what we can get done and when needs to be, all that needs to be considered. So I just know there's a lot of excitement about some of the policies that are in the plan, and I think people want to move forward with things, again, like open space and amenities. We can do that. Brian and I can do that. We don't need help necessarily to do that. But if we're also going to look at the housing crisis and putting together sub-area plans and considering the potential, and we didn't even talk about this, but one of the things we've heard about from some is the establishment of neighborhood districts. We've had some conversations about it, but that's something that in the plan it talks about doing is potentially designating parts of the city that are neighborhoods or sub-communities within our larger Meridian community that share some similar values or whatever that looks like. Again, my point is there's a lot that could potentially be done in the new comprehensive plan, and depending on how much the new mayor and council want to do, we may not be enough to get all that done. So I don't want to belabor that, but just plant that seed that maybe some additional resources necessary.
And Caleb, I do think that that is an important component from what I heard last night. There's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion behind certain areas that it's going to be important for some prioritization to happen, and that you bring those with some recommendations on what is doable. And if council then chooses to have a more ambitious list, that where that additional resources might need to come in. But to bring a recommendation forth, and what I challenge the members is to be a part of that. But I think there was some expectations in the comprehensive plan that it was more than it actually is. It doesn't mean that more can't happen, but it does have to prioritize as far as work products go.
So we'd just like to reiterate, you know, this thus far it's the community's plan. Brian and I are just starting to write the staff report that will go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's been the community's plan. It still is the community's plan. We think the draft plan reflects the current community, not so much the community of 2002 when a lot of the policies were developed. We've been working on this for almost 2 years again now, trying to hear from everybody that would talk to us, make ourselves available, including other agencies. We've kept those valuable elements from the plan, the current plan, tweaked them again to reflect kind of current values of our community members. And we think this new document, the old document, the current document that we're closing out, kind of closing out today, although it's still in effect until we adopt a new one, has served our community well for the most part. But pretty excited about this new one that's been drafted. I think we'll stand for your questions.
Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Caleb, do you guys anticipate making any changes after the presentation to Planning and Zoning, or is the same plan, same presentation that P&Z is going to see going to be the same that we're going to see?
Mayor, Councilman Kavner. So the staff report, and this is something Brian and I, we are largely trying to respect the steering committee endorsed plan, what we submitted to the clerk for consideration. Quite frankly, though, there's a couple of things in there that as staff, we don't necessarily think it's the right thing for our community. 99% of the things we think are. There's some other areas, though, where we're we don't have veto authority, but that'll be our recommend, kind of like any other project, right? The steering committee has submitted something, we as staff will evaluate that. So I don't know what the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to do either with any more changes to what has been submitted. It'll largely look the same, I think, as when you see it, if that answers your question.
Madam Mayor, follow up.
It probably should look the same, but you'll have all of those suggested changes in the staff report, both from a staff perspective and the recommendations by Planning and Zoning.
Underline strike through, similar to what you're used to seeing in a development application. That would be, you can see any changes since application submittal.
Okay. Any other questions? Again, we said it in the first hour, but want to reiterate, thank you for all the work that you've put into it, all the extra outreach that you made to make sure it is our public's plan. Appreciate that. Okay, item 5C is an update. I think Cameron's here to give an update on the Maine to Meridian project. It's not the official update, but it's an update.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Good to be with you. Grateful for the opportunity to provide an update to you. Wanted to do this and get you up to speed on what's going on there across the way at the Old City Hall side, as well as the Maine to Meridian lofts, as they're now being called. I think many of you may see in my weekly update, in my weekly department update, I'll include from the project manager there at Pacific Companies, their weekly updates. So hopefully that keeps you generally abreast, but felt like this would be a good time to pause and do this on the public, in front of everybody. So just a couple quick things. As you may have seen, obviously the demolition is complete, and so that was a good step forward and a good milestone. One of the holdups has been the environmental reviews, and so that has been completed, and those have all come back clean. So that's a good thing. They've got a good site, clean site to move forward with there. Another component of any project is the financing piece. So they're working through the financing for the project. But irrespective of whether they do a bank financing, they're committed to moving forward with their timeline. So basically how they do that, they'll either do it on their own, and they've done that before, or they'll move forward with a bank loan. But I guess my point in that is that the financing will be moving forward. Let's see here. Another concern that's come up, had good conversation with our code enforcement and, just other downtown businesses about the weeds and the abatement there. So I've had some good conversation with the developer on that. They do have an abatement plan underway, and so hopefully that will be addressed here shortly. That is a concern. We've heard that, and we're in communication with the developer on that. One of the things I do want to kind of highlight, I guess, that has been an impediment to the process for them is there's some ACHD easements and cross-access agreements that are still pending, and what that means. Essentially what they need to get in place is those agreements with First Interstate Bank. And so pending that approval from First Interstate is the ACHD approval, which then will cascade down to an actual building permit. So that is a focus right now for their engineers and others. And we've had outreach to FIB and trying to move that forward. We don't see really any reason why that's an impediment, but it's just running through their process to get signed by the right people. So that is an impediment to the building permitting. There has been some discussion about doing some grading and site prep work. So you know, hopefully that can at least be kicked off. But needless to say, no building permit has been issued at this point. So that really is the focus. But the developer feels like, again, that pending, you know, they're still on track for a fall of next year occupancy and opening. So that's the report as I've received it, and hopefully that answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kevner.
question, just to comment. Cameron, you don't have to bring these updates to us, but I appreciate that you do. It's not our building anymore, but naturally, I think we as council get inquiries from the public, and both the report that you provide each week to your department and these, I think, are helpful in us understanding what's going on. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Councilman Kavner, I appreciate that because I feel vested as well. So I want to make sure we're giving you good updates on it.
Well, we talked about that, Mr. Kevner, and agree, but wanted to make sure it's on the public record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, item 5D is, I think, Mr. Neri.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I want to update you on the Dairy Board request. They were in front of you on September 3rd. They raised a few questions about this year's parade and some of the city's participation, and they also left a bill for $1,300 to MAV Event Services for the additional staffing that they hired to assist with the parade. So the day after, I did send out a email to all of our special events team to inquire about some of the questions that were raised by the Dairy Board and some of the questions the council had had. And one of the questions the council had asked was there additional funds from the budget that was approved for this event that could absorb some or all of that cost that they had requested. There was also a concern raised by the board in regard to soft costs of personnel time versus hard costs for like the security person or the additional staffing personnel that are hired, and then they also weren't clear about the safety plan or the traffic plan and how that gets approved, and they also again had to hire some people because they had some volunteers canceled on them at the last minute, so they also hired some additional services. Sergeant Arnold is here. He was the traffic supervisor at the time, so he can help answer some questions about the staffing concern they brought up about Friday versus Saturday and how that may have impacted the parade. But in putting out this to the different parts of the team, the budgeted amount that was approved by the council for this event was $6,000. The invoice from Specialty Construction for the traffic control devices that were provided was $5,898.75. So there's $101 left in the approved budget for this. The soft costs of personnel are already absorbed in the departments, so there's not a separate line item for this event in the city budget. All of the departments absorb all of the cost of their overtime out of their normal budget. The city, because we passed an ordinance a few years ago creating an exception for historical events that were over 75 years old, they do not have to pay the cost of renting the facility, so the cost of renting Story Park for this entire event is waived for this, so they don't absorb any cost for that. I did contact Ada County Highway District. They indicated that between staff time and equipment, they actually donated $1,852 to this event as well in their time, as well as some of their materials. The traffic plans are reviewed or submitted by Specialty Construction. That is the standard locally. They are then reviewed by Meridian Police and Fire and ACHD prior to approval. So the issue that seemed to be part of the concern or discussion points from the board was the numerous discussions we've had over the last number of years about stationing adults along those side streets, and we talked about it a little bit that night. So it's not a new request of having adults there. As this parade's gotten bigger over the last number of years, what has happened is when they've had volunteers there, sometimes they walk away, sometimes they just go enjoy the parade, and then the barricades get moved, and then people start pushing into those side streets, which then pushes them into the parade. So that's why we've reiterated that each year at our prep meeting for this event, that they need to have people there, that that is a safety factor that is very important to police and fire. So it's not a new requirement. Again, at this point, again, I think Sergeant Arnold can provide information about the staffing concern, but really tonight we're just seeking your direction. They left the bill with our clerk. I'd like to either respond to them in some fashion on what your direction is on whether or not the city's going to absorb the cost. Again, there's only 100 left in what was approved, so there'd be about a $1,200 budget amendment that would have to come forward in October, if that's your direction. I think that's all we're seeking, is what you would like us to respond to them. And he has, actually, Sergeant Arnold has information about this contract for MAV as well, because that was something discussed prior to the parade with the city. So,
Okay. Any questions from council? Okay. Well, I wasn't part of the discussion, so I'm not sure how it was left, but it sounds like staff is asking if the city feels that we need to pay for this unanticipated cost to the city. We paid for the piece that we committed to, and you have $100.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Milam.
Sergeant Arnold has been sitting here through all of his comprehensive plan stuff, so I figure we should give him the opportunity to come up and maybe talk to us about the patrols portion of that and anything else. I haven't seen you in a while, Stacy.
I think he learned a lot from the comprehensive plan discussion.
I did.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So there were some questions brought up to me over probably the last week or so about staffing and safety plans and things like that. The first thing I'll talk about is the safety plan. When we started this, when I took over the traffic team in 2016, 2015, we used an incident command system. We have a command post set up kind of outside of the parade route, just outside. We have police, fire, highway district, specialty construction, EMS, all on site. So if we have any kind of an incident, we're prepared to respond to it from there. We also have additional officers that we keep kind of there at the command post, so if there is something that happens, we're ready to respond right away. So the safety plan, it's not a written plan, it's not set in stone, because there's really no way to predict what's going to happen. We know that we'll use the incident command system, and we'll respond to whatever comes up as needed. The staffing for the parade, I went back over the last 6 years, so 16, 17, 18, and 19. In 2016, we had 10 officers at the parade. In 2017, we had 12. In 2018, we had 12. In 2019, we had 10. So this year we had about the same amount of officers that we normally have, between 10 and 12 officers. That includes bicycle units, honor guard team, a supervisor, motor officers, a patrol car, things like that to make sure that everything runs safely. So I don't think that there was any shortage of officers. We knew this year going into it that it was on a Saturday, so we didn't have an overlap shift for swing shift that day. But we also knew that we probably weren't going to need them because the traffic is not Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock traffic, it's Saturday afternoon traffic. And while it's still busy, it's nothing like it is on a Friday afternoon. So we knew we weren't going to need extra officers for that. The Kiwanis was supposed to provide us with some volunteers. They kind of backed out last minute. And I had suggested that we use MAV Security to supplement that because they're a paid security company, and they're the people that do BSU Bronco football. So they're pretty well-versed in large events, large-scale events, so they know what they're doing. We really need to have people at those intersections. We can't leave those intersections with nobody there. I know the Meridian High School football team had come up at one of the meetings and says, "Hey, we want to help out. You know, we can do that." But the problem is, you put a 16 or 17-year-old kid at this intersection with an angry person who just can't get over the fact that they can't get through the parade, and they'll say, "Okay, we'll go ahead," or whatever the case may be. But they don't they don't have the authority, I guess, to stop them and say you're not going to do this, where a paid professional security officer will tell them, no, you can't do this, this is why you can't do this, and you need to find a different route. And even with the volunteers, we've had issues in the past with volunteers that once the parade starts, they've left their post and went and sat with their family. And people that, you know, the 5 o'clock afternoon traffic that wants to get home that forgot that the parade is that day will just get out of the car and move the barrels out of the way and drive through the parade at the first chance they get. It really creates a safety hazard for everybody around that area because you don't know, you're dealing with a lot of pedestrian traffic and you're really dealing with a lot of kids, and you're dealing with kids that are running out on the road trying to get candy and get a better view, and people that are driving their cars don't know what the pedestrians are going to do. So it really creates a big deal when you have an intersection along Main Street that's not protected by a person that's saying you can't be here. So that's why we really want those adult people at those intersections.
Is this something you require unique to this, or you require all community events to have that kind of?
You know, at the Winterland Parade, we require the same thing. They have to have an adult volunteer there to tell people you can't drive through the parade. You have to turn around and go the other way, or park, or walk, or whatever the case may be. But you can't. We don't allow people under 18 to direct traffic.
Madam Mayor.
Questions? Yes.
So was it the city's responsibility to recruit volunteers, and then when they backed out, we?
No, it was up to the dairy board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Milam.
thank you for the clarification on the staff. And I mean, personally, we have the same amount. I feel that we have about the same amount that we normally have. I don't know why they felt that was a lot less. I feel that we held up to our end of the bargain. I'm okay with giving them the difference between what we committed to, the $6,000, and what we've spent. However, they knew ahead of time they could have come to us for permission, or to ask us if they wanted our contribution to pay this additional. They could have done it before the parade. And none of us sitting here could have spent that money and expect to be reimbursed. And so I think that it's kind of a slippery slope to let somebody come in and say, oh, well, I needed this in addition, now I want to be reimbursed. So, sorry, Dairy Board. Maybe the 6,000.
Madam Mayor?
Mr.
Well,
Grimes.
there was other people that wanted to say something, I think.
Okay. Stacy, do you feel like the safety plan was communicated effectively prior to the parade?
I had explained we had some planning meetings before the parade, and I explained to them, even though we don't have the shift overlap, we still have officers there ready to respond to anything that happens. And whether it's a cement truck that goes crazy and drives over a bunch of people, or you're an active shooter, or a person falls off a float, or somebody gets hit by a car, we're staffed and prepared and ready to start responding to that incident. And we take those major catastrophes in
The same
in
He's
little,
been there all night long.
little pieces. We take them in small bites at a time, but you know, initially we're there and we're ready to go for whatever the case may be. And that was explained to them. Even though we don't have the overlap team, we still have other officers that are ready to be there. And
Mayor, follow up?
Mm-hmm.
I don't doubt that for a second that we weren't prepared. The only reason I asked that question, it seemed like when the dairy board presented to us a couple weeks ago, they somewhat insinuated that there was a little bit of confusion, like we dropped the ball as far as our commitment to them and how we were going to help them out. And so that's.
yeah, I'm not sure where that confusion came from. I thought it was pretty clear.
Okay, that's my only question I have.
Okay. Anything further?
Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Palmer.
And my understanding was the 6,000 was for barriers, signs, whatnot, not for staffing, not for any of that kind of thing. And so I feel that we've met what's not even an obligation. I feel like we've met our commitment, and that even maxing out to the rest of the 6,000 isn't necessary nor a responsibility.
Okay, well, we are looking for direction from council, and if there's no direction to pay an invoice, I guess we will move on. Okay.
Madam Mayor, one last comment.
Mr.
You know, it was quite noticeable, and I said this a couple weeks ago, but there were quite a few more people, in my opinion, that were at this parade. And I think that going forward, if we're going to have the parade on Saturdays, and I believe that there's just going to be more people, because more people are going to be available to attend. And it's a great event. I mean, the Dare Board's done a fantastic job in the past, and it's a Meridian staple. I mean, everyone knows it. I mean, not only in City of Meridian, but people throughout the Treasure Valley come and watch this parade as well. And so I would just hope, in the future, I give some direction to the Dairy Board to plan for this. And if you feel like you need, if you feel like your costs are going up, then we just need to discuss that in the future instead of having to take care of it on the back end. It's always easiest to take care of it on the front end, if possible.
And I know those additional costs with the Winterland Parade, we went out and got additional sponsors. And as our community goes, so does the opportunity for corporate sponsors. And certainly, I would help ask, so.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kevner.
a couple of thoughts. One, we authorized a not to exceed amount for $6,000. I don't think we need to quibble over $100. That's what we authorized up to. I'm supportive of that. Dairy Days is a unique event. We've kind of given it a special designation. There aren't any other long-term community events that have existed in Meridian over 75 years. I mean, it's kind of narrowly structured to really talk about Dairy Days. So I think it shows that our community is very supportive of the event and the partnership that we have. We as a council have also been fortunate for a number of years. We had a council member who was also on the Dairy Show board and was able to maybe transmit some of that communication, and maybe with that absence, we've lost a little of that neighborly communication. So I think it's important that, some of the feedback that we heard from the Dairy Show board is that they would maybe like a little bit more of that communication, whether that's with staff or them feeling like that they've got a sounding board with the council. I would hope that maybe we can put our heads together with new council and a new mayor in January and just make sure that we're providing that extra level of community service or customer service to an event that is, to Councilmember Burnt's comments, a staple of our community. So I don't think that anybody did anything wrong. I just think, I mentioned this to somebody earlier. I think the city thought we were on the same page. I think the Dairy Show board thought we were on the same page, and it turns out we're on two different pages. So let's make sure that we've got everybody in the right room at the beginning so that we're in a good place moving forward. Not just for 2020, but for 2040 and 2060. This is a great community event. I'd hate to see it go away. So.
Well, and before our city clerk might blow a gasket, or should, we put a lot of staff time into this. I know the thought that goes into this TUP and the communication from the city standpoint. I know the increased costs from picking up garbage in our park and the waiver of a lot of fees. There's a big investment that this community is putting into maintaining our portion of this community event. But we do need to go to the community to also support it. It shouldn't just be at the taxpayer expense. And I think we've grown enough as a city that there would be those corporate partners that can step in. If there's a suggestion on how we can better communicate, I'm all for it. But I do know the amount of time and attention that you and your team, Officer Arnold, give to this event, what our city clerk's office also dedicates to this, because we want it to continue to honor this community staple as well. But if there's certainly better ways that we can communicate, we would be very open to that. But I don't want to walk away from this without saying we have done absolutely everything that we think we can, short of having Councilman Byrd on the board. And I can tell you Councilman Byrd was not a good communication conduit. He wasn't. But we always need to work on our communication, and if there's ways that the Dairy Show Board has that we can be better communicators, we would love to do that. But I don't think that is the situation here. But we will do everything we
I
can.
think overall, the communication between police and the dairy board was really good. I think we just kind of got off track, and maybe there was one or two people that weren't quite clear on what our role was. And maybe I could have done a better job of communicating that to them. But I think overall, the communication between the police and the dairy board and the police in the city, or the police representing the city, went really well. I attended a lot of meetings with the dairy board and had some sandwiches and some pizza, and we talked about how the parade's going to go, and overall I think it really showed, because I think the parade went really well this year. It was probably one of the better parades that I've been involved in, and I can remember back in the day when the police department, it was all 25 patrol officers in uniform, and you were going to be out here, and it kind of progressed away from that, and now it's, we have 10 or 12 officers, and I think collaboratively we do a really good job.
Well, thank you for everything you do, and I can tell you that this year's princesses were the best ever. So,
Madam Mayor, I guess, if I may, I
Mr.
just want
Kenner.
to iterate and say, I don't think there was any issue with the way that our staff were communicating with the Dairy Show Board. What I think is, because Dairy Days is unique and because it has a special designation, I don't think maybe everybody at the Dairy Show Board or the city have a collective understanding as to what that is. I don't know if the Dairy Show Board understands the significant amount of investment that the city puts forth in this event. They may only see it as the $6,000 that we authorize to spend, and maybe don't take into account all the significant additional costs, not just from the city, but also from, now I've learned, from the highway district. So that's why I think it's important to maybe have a couple of folks that can represent that particular piece with the Dairy Show Board at the beginning, so they understand what the city's investment is in their event from the get-go.
I think defining roles and responsibilities would be great. I think, Mr. Neary, in the past, we have kind of captured estimated costs of overtime and the waiver of the park fees and all of that to give a good accounting as to what the city's investment has done. We've done that in the past.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this is one of the few events of this magnitude that we don't do a contract agreement with, mostly because the Dairy Board didn't like doing them, so we stopped doing them. So you're correct. In the past, we did try to capture that in an agreement, but they didn't like to do them, so we stopped. So we can find a way to memorialize that, so at least they do understand, because I think that is the missing piece, is they don't always understand the significant amount of investment that the city does make into this parade, besides the traffic control. So.
Well, if we can do an agreement and not expect them to sign it, just to detail out what our roles, responsibilities, and our associated costs would be, sure. I think that would be a good compromise.
Great.
Any other ideas?
Okay. Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
Well, I think we're talking in a lot of circles, kind of, but it's a good conversation to have. But what this specific topic is all about is that they lost their volunteers. And as this community grows, I do believe there are probably a lot of other volunteers as well as community, business, corporate partners that would probably help out. I don't think it's an additional funding issue that should be taken on by the city. However, we committed to $6,000, so I move that we reimburse the Dairy Board the difference between what we paid out and the $6,000 that we made a commitment to for this year.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor, just one additional comment. And I say this, I guess, as a Kiwanian. I know we got a member of the Dairy Board here. As a Kiwanian, I didn't know that we had been asked to volunteer, and so I hope that there's an opportunity for that club to be re-invited back. And I'm happy to work traffic control and not be on a float next year. You at least have one.
Nice.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. No. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Morton.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you.
All righty.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
Good job. Thanks, Mike.
I'm sorry, Sergeant.
Happens all the time.
Okay. If there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to close our workshop meeting.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kavner.
before I do, I just want to make sure we noted that Councilmember Borton joined us at about, my eyes were correct, about
3 hours ago?
5:05 PM. I just want to make sure for the record that
Our clerk did note that. He assured me he
with that,
takes that.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn our workshop meeting.
Second.
A motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes.